What's up everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Rickerson Outdoors. Today we're going to get into a little bit of backcountry bow hunting and what I've learned as a first-time beginner. Now I know there's a lot of other videos out there of pros talking about the most common mistakes that a beginner makes, but I would make the argument that some of those pros that have 12, 13, 14 seasons underneath their belt are a little bit too far removed from the beginner stages and may not know some of the common mistakes that beginners actually do make. And so in this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the mistakes that I made and some of the mistakes that we fixed in order to be successful in the backcountry hunting for elk on our first go around. With that, let's roll the intro. Alright, so the first mistake that I think a lot of first-time backcountry bow hunters mistake is not getting out and actually scouting for elk in the preseason. Now I know for a lot of us that's a difficult thing to do, and it's a big ask if you have to take off work to get into the backcountry to actually scout and not even hunt. So one thing that I like to do in order to get out and scout and utilize your vacation time in a manner that's both fun for you and your family or whoever you're with is to do something that I like to call crossover scouting. Now what crossover scouting is, during those times when you're taking vacation in the summer, say, let's call it a 4-day trip to Colorado, and a lot of us are not only backcountry bow hunters, but a lot of us like to fly fish or hike or just be in the mountains in general. And if you're one of those people like me, this is what I like to do. When I go into planning these vacations, I'm also looking for spots that I might potentially want to bow hunt. And a lot of times, some of my explorations for fly fishing have led to discovering herds of elk. And that's actually what happened on my first bow hunt. Is I originally found this spot because I was fly fishing some of my favorite creeks way back in the back country. And with that, I eventually noticed each time I went back in there, heck, there's a lot of elk back here every time I'm going. And so that got me thinking of every time I'm going to go explore a new fly fishing creek, I want to make it a spot that also looks elky. So that way, if the creek I go explore and hike into is a bust and I don't find fish, maybe there's a herd of elk. And I could make the same argument of if you're the type of person that just likes to go hike through the mountains, then find a hiking trail that also goes through some elky looking woods. And that way when you're covering ground, one, you're doing something that you like, you're out hiking, and two, you're also scouting. So that way it's not just a purely, I'm gonna go and scout for elk. No, you're out there hiking, you're doing what you would already vacation and do, but at the same time, you're looking for elk, you're actively picking spots in strategic hikes or fly fishing trips that could possibly produce elk or mule deer or whatever kind of backcountry western hunt that you're looking to do. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is when you arrive your first day, your tendency is, oh, I hope we just have our spot all to ourselves. And a lot of opportunities, especially for beginner hunters, most people start with over-the-counter hunts. That's what we did. And if that's what the case, the reality is you're not gonna have your spot to yourself. There will be other hunters around. And the best advice I could give you is be friendly. Don't be discouraged just because there's other people around. Some of those people on those trailheads are some of the best people that you will ever meet. Be friendly, talk. You'd be surprised at the tips and tricks that you can get from those people at the trailhead. Tip number three. Alright, there's a stigma in elk hunting that beginners on over-the-counter hunts should not be calling. And yes, I know I don't have that much experience elk hunting, but what I do know is on this trip, calling was one of our favorite parts. It kept us in the game. Every time we'd set up and call, we were just laser focused and ready for an elk to actually come in. If you're not calling and you're just kind of waiting around, still hunting, being quiet and hoping an elk comes by, or you're covering a lot of ground hoping to run into elk, a lot of times you can get really relaxed and you won't see elk for a couple hours, and then all of a sudden you're in them. And by the time you realize that you're in them, it's too late because you've already spooked that herd of elk. But if you're walking and you're setting up and calling every 200 yards, what we found is it kept us in the game. We kept us alert and looking for elk. And because we didn't end up spooking a whole lot of elk. And this kind of kept us in the game, and it kept us having fun. At one point, me and Zach were just like, all right, you know what? Let's just set up a calling and let's just act like two bulls going after each other. We set up about 50 yards apart, just hoping to do something a little bit different. And what we found, that's one of the highlights of our trip, was just calling back and forth to each other. And yes, maybe that was stupid, and maybe that wasn't the best way to actually shoot an elk, but I would argue that having fun back there and keeping a positive attitude and being able to stay focused is way more important. And if calling is what does that for you and keeps you laser focused and in the game, then I think you should do it. Whether or not people around you and the veterans agree with you. All right, the fourth thing I got for you is weight matters. I went into this trip and my pack weighed 85 pounds, and that was a mistake. I went into this trip and with everything on my pack, with bow, camera gear, all that kind of stuff, my pack weighed 85 pounds. And that was a big mistake for me. I know Zach went into this trip and his pack weighed a whole lot less, and he was a whole lot more mobile, and he ended up being a lot more prepared, especially for these early season September over-the-counter hunts and in archery season. You don't need a whole lot. And so I had a lot of stuff that were really just comfort items that I maybe used once or twice. I know I had a jacket that I didn't use, and that's valuable weight that you think it doesn't add up. A 2.5 pound jacket, extra granola bars that you may or may not eat. Man, it adds up so fast. And if you can cut your pack down from 85 to 65 pounds, it's a huge difference. It's going to let you hunt harder and longer and ultimately lead to more success. So that's one of the things that next year when we go back, I'm most definitely cutting down. I'm going to get a lighter lens. I'm going to cut down on the amount of clothing that I bring. I'm going to cut down on the amount of food that I bring and the types of food that I bring in order to cut that weight down, because weight matters. All right, now, so this is tip number 5, and I think this is the most important tip for first-time elk hunters. A lot of first-time elk hunters have the background of whitetail hunting, whether you're coming from the eastern United States or Texas or Nebraska, wherever you're coming from. A lot of first-time Western hunters have the background of whitetail hunting. Now, this is important to remember. Elk are not whitetail. Don't be a whitetail hunter. Don't walk through the woods quiet as can be while you're calling. Now, elk are loud animals. If you watch a herd of elk going through the woods, they're loud. They're talking to each other. They're snapping sticks. You can hear bulls with their racks going through trees and whatnot. Don't be a whitetail hunter. For me, this is one of the main reasons why I was able to be successful on my first trip, is because I made sure not to be a whitetail hunter. So this is the story on how I actually got my opportunity to shoot this elk. Is we spotted this elk at the end of a long, about a mile long valley. So I was on one end and he was on the other. And I saw him, I grabbed my pack, and I just tucked in barely inside the timberline. And I watched this elk come down across this valley and feed across this valley, and he kind of tucked up around a corner. I grabbed my pack and grabbed my bow, and I made a beeline to that elk. Now, if you had done this while you were whitetail hunting, you would have spooked every single whitetail out of there and you would have had no shot. But since it's an elk don't mind a little bit of noise. As I got closer and closer to him, when I got into calling range, I started making a couple light cow calls just to slow him down from coming around that corner and going up this side of the mountain. And then as I came across and as I caught up to him and went around this corner in this valley, he saw me first. I went around the corner and he was looking at me through a group of trees. And I knew right then and there that I had a decision to make. I could sit there and be as still as possible, or I could make a move and retreat back around the corner. Now, elk are a whole lot more curious than a whitetail. A whitetail would have been out of there long before I even caught up to him. But this elk had heard those soft cow calls when I was running up to him and catching up, and he knew that maybe there's some elk back there. And so my thought process was, I came around this corner and he's looking at me through these trees, so I know he can't see me that great, and I'm probably 40 yards away from him. And so what I ended up doing is I sprinted back around the corner, and I was loud. There was no secret that there's something there. And as soon as I made it around the corner, I set up to make sure I got my ranges and whatnot, and I started doing a little bit of cow calling, nice and soft, nothing urgent, just enough to make him curious. And sure enough, he comes walking around the corner just to investigate, like, what is this? And I made sure I had good wind and whatnot. And because of the fact that I didn't hunt like a whitetail hunter, because these are not whitetail, they are elk. They are very curious animals. And because I was aggressive and I wasn't afraid to make noise and call, I was able to get a shot on my first elk and put an arrow in him, and he didn't go but 150 yards. Now, if I had chosen to be a whitetail hunter, I would never have made that aggressive move. I would never have moved after the elk had seen me. And because I did this, I was able to be successful. So with that, y'all, just a review of the things that we talked about is: 1, crossover scouting. Very important in order to get time in the field and understand where those elk are and where they are not. And secondly, is be friendly to other hunters. If you're in an over-the-counter unit, be friendly to them. You'll be surprised the tips that you can get from people that have already been there. Number 3, don't be afraid to call. Calling is very important. It keeps you in the game and it provides opportunities for you to shoot an elk. If I had gone into this season not prepared to call, I would not have gotten a shot on this elk and I would not have been successful. Number 4 is weight matters. Cut down items that you don't absolutely need. You will be able to hunt longer and harder, and this will get you more chances to be successful in the field. Number 5 is don't be a whitetail hunter. Don't do it. Be aggressive, have fun, run after these animals. That's the beauty of elk hunting, is you're not stuck in a tree stand. Granted, you can hunt elk out of a tree stand, but the fun part of elk hunting is being able to go after, spot and stalk, and be aggressive on these animals. Even if that doesn't provide success to you immediately and you make a couple failed stalks, I guarantee you it'll be one of the most fun experiences that you have. And that's why we're out there. We're out there to have fun. So go after them. Be aggressive on these animals. Don't be dumb about it. Make sure you have good wind and make sure you're not just being reckless. But don't be afraid to be aggressive and make aggressive moves and act like an elk when you're approaching. With that, y'all, I hope this is helpful on five mistakes or tips that beginners can use in order to be successful backcountry hunting.
Dude, I was thinking about that. I was like, man,
Too
we
well,
find this?
Alright, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's recover an elk first.
And then
Yeah.
pack it out. We still have a heavy load ahead of us.
We have a long ways to go.
Because what's tomorrow, Thursday? It's gonna take us all day.